Sound on, sound on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very rare, as I said last week on Instagram and all throughout the Sportswire radio social media pages, that you get a chance to speak with a triple threat. And tonight we have that chance because our guest here with us, if you're a huge fan of the Five Town Sound Athletics program like I am, you just heard her over the past weekend here calling the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Tournament for both the men's and women's teams. She also has called some of the games here for the Five Town Sound men's basketball program, and she has already had a decorated career. We've seen her on the soccer field make some huge saves. We've seen her on the basketball court dish out some big plays. She was also a part of the women's team that wound up winning the Hudson Valley last year, and she's got her own show on WFTU radio, which means she's going to take my mic over here very soon. So she needs no further introduction, but we're going to give it to her anyway. So wait for it. Further ado here on the Sports Report. Number one, Global Sports Show. The triple threat from our Five Town Sound Athletics program. Sydney Mountain. The triple threat is here. Sydney, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I hope you're good after that. Certainly, I'm sure you're not quite used to that over at Five Towns, considering the guy that was doing the sideline reporting at the last game. I don't want to signal him out, but poor guy was a little timid there with the microphone. But we ain't going to have that problem here on Sportswire. I can assure you on that. But before I get to some people already tuned in on Facebook, because we have many fans, we're thankful for that. I mean, Sydney, talk about here broadcasting this past weekend for the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, the women's and men's basketball teams, and seeing the teams win the championship. What was that experience like? We know you've done it as a player, but what was that like in being able to call these games here throughout this past weekend?
Well, it was definitely a really great experience for me to get obviously more experience under my belt in case this is something that I want to do in the future. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to play in the tournament this year because of low numbers. So it definitely gave me a new opportunity to do something other than play basketball. So it's definitely helping me get into a direction that I may want to go into the future. So it was honestly just a really great experience for me to be able to call 4 out of 5 games and then do sideline reporting for the one game that I didn't call. So, but being able to call some of those games, I do have like close relations with some of the people on the Villa Maria women's basketball team. So it was great to see Coach McCarthy and his daughter Mia McCarthy again, because he coached me and her in high school. I played all 4 years with her. So it was definitely great to see them again and be able to see them win a championship of their own.
So it was almost like this was your life part 2, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Who would have thought, right? You guys came from the top of the state, for those that are listening and watching, and then you go literally to down the state. So who would have thought that? We'll definitely get into that. But I was curious also because obviously you're still playing out there. We expect you to be back on the soccer field and the basketball court, obviously, next season. And did it give you a different perspective maybe as a player, and whether it's basketball or soccer, kind of being by the microphone and calling these games? Did that give you a different perspective on things maybe?
Oh, definitely. I mean, being able to sit at the desk and watch the entire court, not even just as a spectator's point of view, being able to watch it as an announcer, you get more into games because obviously you have to pay attention to every single thing that's happening. So
I was watching you. It's funny you said that. I was watching you and Aaron. And then your other person, you with Aaron, I actually know a little bit, and you were watching everything. We had the computer with the almost on the FTC and the Hudson Valley website. You had the stats kind of side by side, and I saw you referring to it throughout the telecast.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have some reference points there. So usually we bring a roster of both teams, home and away. We have the laptop set up for live stats just in case our graphics people don't see those in time. We can bring them up on our own, and then of course the TV's there so we can see like what's happening on the broadcast to see who when we're live, like on camera, and also, it gives us a shot of the corners of the gym because we can't see them because of the folding doors that open up to the studio. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot of equipment and a lot of preparation go into each and every game, and it's honestly really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I would think so. And I want to give a couple of shout outs first before I ask you a few more questions on that, plus a little bit more. I want to give a shout out to my guest last week, who I'm going to be referring to, I know, this coming week, and that is Skulls out in the state of California. He's a soul collector, apparently. So I know, Sydney, you might want to keep away from him. He collects souls. And Skulls wants to remind me, because he's done some broadcasting, he says he calls it a recap when you do a kind of stats in a teleprompter when you're on during a halftime and post game. Thank you very much for that. Uncle Ralph, all the way out there from the UK, and Uncle Ralph is always a huge part of things for our friends over at Cutlery Championship Wrestling. I know Uncle Ralph will be tuned in with me Friday. He says, "Good evening, Tom, and good evening, Sydney." And I was curious about that because people think, oh, okay, you and Aaron or anybody else you're with just takes a few short minutes and you go live, or you only talk for 2 hours. But I know a little bit about this because obviously I'm sort of in this. I wouldn't quite say I'm as good as you or everybody else, but I do know that it takes hours upon hours to kind of get these telecasts ready, whether it's to stream them on YouTube or the FTC website or anywhere else. So, I mean, how long does it take really for you and anybody else that are on these games to kind of really set up? And is it a day long project? And kind of take us maybe a day in the life of Sydney Mountain, the commentator.
So if we have a game, say on Friday, me and whoever is doing the play by play will meet with our graphics person and the director of our show. Graphics is Anthony. Anthony does a great job at graphics. One of the
Yes,
best.
I saw him. He was going. You guys shouted him out at the end of the game. I saw that he got
Yeah.
in there and he had his Met shirt on. And yeah, good job, Anthony.
So definitely have to give him a shout out, and definitely director James Miller, one of the best directors I've ever worked with. But definitely have to give them a shout out. But we meet with them usually around Tuesday. If a game's Friday, this honestly is like kind of a week long thing. Tuesday we
Okay.
kind of sit there and we discuss like the storyline of what we want to talk about before the game, because we usually have things like keys to the game, players to watch, or last matchup type graphics that we have to put in there. So we usually talk about that. We usually meet for 1 or 2 hours that first day because we all have very different class schedules. So after we discuss that, the next day or even Thursday, we'll come in and we'll make all the graphics of the things that we discussed. So after we do that, it's kind of just preparation and being able to time our intros with the drone camera shot that we have coming into the sound arena, and then being able to time it up with the graphics person to deliver an intro quick and very smoothly.
Well, you guys do a phenomenal job, and you already seem like a natural. And I could certainly see some of those things that you spoke about. And I'm almost curious, and certainly we'll get into the playing in a few minutes. But when it comes to preparing for a game as a player versus off the field, I mean, is it Is it more difficult, or is it the same, or what's that preparation versus when you're playing versus to when you're actually calling it?
Playing wise, I'd say it's definitely a little bit more difficult because not only do you have to be like mentally ready and there in the moment, but you also have to be physically ready. And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult just because of injuries that I've had in the past, or long hours of practice, and maybe like twisted an ankle here at practice, or just being able to get physically ready for games and mentally ready as well. So definitely it takes a little bit more effort to get ready as player wise, whereas broadcasting is more so getting ready mentally.
No question about that. I could certainly see these things. And Skulls actually has a rather good question, which I was going to ask you a little while, because you have a radio show, which we'll talk about in a little while as well. But he says, what got you into broadcasting?
Oh goodness, I'd probably have to say around my sophomore or junior year in high school, every morning that my dad took me to school, because I had a pretty long car ride. I had about a half an hour car ride to get to school. So we'd sit there and we'd listen to AM 550 radio, which is the Buffalo Sports Talk radio.
Yep,
So
I heard of it. Sure.
I listened to that every single morning, and every single morning I'd listen to it and I'd start to develop my own opinions about the topics that they were discussing, and I'd talk about it with my dad in the car on the way to school, and he told me that the way that I'm making these opinions and bringing them out to him, he told me that he could definitely see me getting into the broadcasting radio aspect of sports, because I told him that I wanted to continue doing sports as a career, because there's no way I could ever let sports go, and I could never stop. So I first thought about doing physical training and stuff like that, and being a personal trainer and helping children develop basketball skills. But then I slowly got into the radio aspect, and then the analysis on ESPN or halftime shows of football games that I watch or basketball games. And I started to slowly get into more so of the broadcasting and the radio aspect of it, whereas I kind of left the training in the past. So definitely listening to the radio shows with my dad in the morning during high school got me into trying to pursue a career in broadcasting or radio.
I'll tell you what, I mean, it's a long career because you can only play so long out there on the field or on the court. And broadcasters, I mean, listen, Vince Scully, who God rest his soul, I mean, he was calling games pretty much till almost he literally couldn't do it anymore. And the Mets
Mm-hmm.
many years ago famously had a guy, Bob Murphy, and obviously Ralph Kiner hung around there for a long time. So listen, you never really know. And listen, I mean, that's sort of my memories growing up as a kid in Brooklyn, New York, and we would listen to WFAN, which I'm sure you've heard of by now, and that was kind of my deal. But I want to get a few more people who want to say hello to you. That is Adam Morgan. Adam is a big pro wrestling star out of the state of Texas. You got everybody around the world that was waiting to hear from you. He says woo. He gives the big Ric Flair woo. So we'll come back to some of the broadcasting in a second, but obviously I want to go into the playing and obviously with the program, and obviously let's talk first about the soccer team, because obviously we had on Coach Jeff Litwin not too long ago, and he spoke quite a bit about you, and obviously there's been a little bit of an upheaval in the team. Obviously now we're going to have a coach here full time that could kind of dedicate some of the things, and he has a player already on that you've played with that's on this team. So I mean, talk to me about maybe kind of what are the things you're looking forward to with the women's soccer team first next season, and certainly Coach Litwin here coming involved.
Well, definitely the experience that Coach Litwin has. I'm excited to see, because he also turned a soccer program around at Roosevelt. So I'm excited to see him come here and be able to try and turn our program around. I'm not saying that we were doing bad, because I mean we made it to the championship this past year, the HVIC championship, but we definitely want to be able to get some goals on the scoreboard during the championship game and possibly win those games. And I think that Coach Litwin's experience and him doing what he does with women's soccer, I definitely believe that he's putting us in the right direction to achieve what we want to achieve as a program.
You feel like last year, obviously, the team does have success. It's a little bit more success here in the 2 years, but we spoke a little bit about this with Coach, I'm sure you heard of. But does it almost feel like, how can I put this? Maybe with not a bitter taste in your mouth, but almost kind of like you're left hanging a little bit, because you guys do get to the championship game. You have a little bit of success. You obviously tasted some success with the basketball team last year, but do you feel like in a way that coach is coming in here and maybe the bar has been raised a little bit in your mind, or expectations are going to be a little bit higher because you're here, some other players are going to be here, they've now got a couple years under their belt, you're not worrying about whether it's the COVID year or who's going to play and who's not. Now you kind of got everything a little bit settled in, and now for the first time we have a coach that's going to be able full time to kind of dedicate himself to you and the rest of your teammates. So is that something you kind of feel in a way, or just give me your thoughts?
I mean, bringing up last year, I definitely don't think it's a bitter taste in any of our mouths, especially because half of us never played soccer, or maybe it had only a year of experience coming into the college season. And I definitely don't think it was bitter. It was More so, I don't want to say surprising, but it was like refreshing to see that the work that we've put in for the past 2 years definitely was shown, because we did end up making it into the conference championship, and we actually had a few more wins other than the one win that we had when it was my first year. So I don't want
Yep.
to say it was bitter, but it was definitely a season to remember, just because of how many accomplishments that I feel that we made, taking baby steps and not trying to go for the home run, you know?
Right, right, right. And that's a fair point. And obviously, I'll come back to a few more comments in a second, which we have here on the board. And I want to thank Skulls for those comments. But I mean, we go from baby steps to where we're in the running this past year and we're competitive. And obviously, as I'm sure you're aware of, the program has had a lot of success in different sports, and especially with the men's soccer team. Conversely, what they've done, obviously, national wins and being number one and everything else. So, does it also maybe something where now you guys are getting a little bit closer to where you want to be, and that conversely you see the success that the men's soccer program has had here these past few years, that now maybe it's driving you, and whether it's some of your other teammates like a Chelsea Martinez, who we'll get to, or Zoe Kolodny, or anybody else that's going to be back on the team. I mean, does that drive you a little bit more, also seeing their success, and now that we're coming a little bit closer to knocking on the door, that now it's driving you a little further to get back out there on the field?
Coming into this next season, I definitely feel as though me and the girls on the team are definitely going to try and be more competitive this year, just because we have seen what we can do. And honestly, with Coach Litwin, he's definitely going to progress our skills even more than we have in the past 2 years. So I feel as though we're definitely going to try and be more competitive this year, and definitely try and follow in the steps of the men's soccer team, because, as you said, they have had many successes at Five Towns. So we definitely want to try and get to the caliber that they are. But like I said, it's definitely taking baby steps for us, just because of how we had to grow as a program. So, but I feel as though we're definitely going to try and be a little bit more competitive next year.
I have no doubt that you guys will, and I want everybody to follow the Five Town Sound women's program at FTC Women's Soccer Five Towns _ Sound on Instagram, because it is always sound on Sportswire Radio. And I'll come back to this team in a second, but the Skull says it's like the Dodgers broadcaster who recently passed. Yes, Vince Scully, referencing your kind of broadcasting journey. He also says it's like the movie Big Green, which I'm not that familiar with. So if I'm not familiar with it, my apologies. But your former coach has tuned in here with the women's soccer team, and you might want to give him a nod. That is Coach Jason Facina, and his young daughter also says hi, who I heard from a little birdie that you were one of her big favorites. And Spitz, I have him on the board, and I know he's tuned in. We'll come back to some of the team in a second, but what was it like with these last few years with Coach Facina on the women's team? Obviously, the men's staff had basically took over and run things here, and obviously did a very, very amicable job here. You guys certainly are going in the right direction. And I mean, what was it like under Coach Facina and learning from him, and obviously his success with the rest of the staff?
Well, coming into school as a freshman, Coach Vicino was one of the first people that I did meet when I got to the school, just because preseason started weeks before school started. So he was one of the first people that I met at school. Coach Vicino is one of the most welcoming, kindest people that I've ever met, especially coming from 9 hours away in Buffalo. It's very hard to adjust to the new settings and the new challenges that I'm going to face. But definitely having Coach Facina there for my first year helped tremendously, just because he does put our well-being very high on his priority list, and he cares for us. He's like a second dad at this point for me.
Absolutely, and I could certainly see that for sure. And I know obviously you play goal, and you've obviously done some big things for us as a goalkeeper. And I was curious in terms of, and I didn't think about this, and we were talking off the air, but I kind of have to bring it up on the air, because obviously we had on Coach Morelli here a few weeks back also. And anything that you took from him, or anything, or any advice that in the times you had with him that maybe you're going to use, whether it's in the future or anything else?
This past season, I didn't play as much goalie as I did my first season. Jordan Tobin kind of took over that role this season. I was more so of a forward on the team. But the days that I did spend with Coach Morelli, he got me out of my shell a little bit more. I was very timid in the net. I had no confidence in myself whatsoever, but definitely working out with Coach Morelli this year, he definitely grew my confidence a little bit more, and definitely developed more skills between the pipes that I can use if I ever do need to go into the net again. But once again, I love Coach Morelli as well.
Oh, absolutely, and big shout out also to Coach Wells, who's with us also. And speaking of that, because obviously we know that you had some moments. I know you scored out there this past season as a forward, and I thought that was the big talk of Instagram. But I mean, what was that adjustment like? I mean, listen, we know you're the triple threat. Maybe we should call you the quadruple threat because you played multiple positions technically. But I mean, what is that like in terms of making an adjustment where you're playing a totally different position, where you're going from goalkeeper to forward? I mean, what was that like throughout this season?
Well, growing up, I played soccer like sporadically. I played like when I was very little in middle school, kind of stopped in high school until my senior year. So most of the time I was actually on the field. The only time that I actually ever played goalie was my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college. So it really wasn't that much of a difference. It was more so me just trying to get used to using my feet again, because I am definitely more so of using my hands. Um, my
Sure,
feet don't work
sure.
as well as my hands do, I can tell you that. But
I got
um,
two left feet. Trust me. You're talking to somebody who has literally two left feet, so don't feel too bad.
but yeah, so it wasn't too much of like a drastic change just because I have played the position before in my life, just not at the collegiate level.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I mean, I could certainly appreciate that. And obviously, we knew a little bit about your background. That kind of matches. And Skulls wants to say it is a female soccer player who became a coach to a bunch of kids and led them to the championship. That was the movie Big Green. I appreciate that. I'll certainly make sure that I check that out here. And you spoke about Jordan Tobin, and obviously Jordan Tobin has been really, I would say, in terms of pound for pound talent here at Five Towns. I mean, she's really been kind of the gold standard. I think about her and a few other players we'll get to in a second. Chelsea Martinez, I'm going to bring up also as somebody I think that's going to join Jordan. But Jordan, we see here, wins Conference Player of the Year, and we see her on the basketball court, the soccer field. I've had her on here in the past, and this girl, I mean, she works multiple jobs. She's an honor student, and she's playing these different sports, and I don't even know how that this girl does it. So talk to me about Jordan Tobin, what kind of teammate she's been like, and just what's been in terms of learning and playing with her.
Playing with Jordan is honestly great. I mean, she takes a lot of pressure off of other people because I I told Coach Facina that I did not want any part of playing in the goal this year just because of the injury that I had last year. I had a lot of like doubts about myself and worrying about whether or not I would be able to do it. So being able to have Jordan step up and take that position, because I mean, she's an amazing goalkeeper. I would have her in that over me any day. But just having her be able to take that weight off of me and play in the goal it definitely took a lot of stress off of my shoulders for the season. But on the flip side, on basketball, I mean, she just makes it so easy to be able to play with, just because of she wants to be there. She wants to give 110% every game. She's always trying to find herself open. She's always trying to find the open person. I mean, most of her points were from my assists, so she made my stats look good
Well,
too.
you kind of imply. I think you kind of implied that on one of the more recent telecasts. Because I think it was you and Aaron were talking about something where there was. I think it was a turnover. I don't know if it was in the. I think it was in the semifinal game. I think it was this past weekend, and you were saying. I think it was Aaron, and you were going back and forth, and you kind of referenced that. You did have some dishes, and a lot of those dishes were going to Jordan Tobin, and obviously Jordan definitely. I mean, just the stats speak for themselves in terms of what Jordan has done, and even what's so impressive to me is what Jordan does off the court, off the field as well. And I want to give a shout out to somebody else that's tuned, another pro wrestler here out there in the UK, Mr. Dave Douglas, one half of the Modern Day Mafia. I want to give him a big shout out. I'm sure Friday he'll be tuned in because I'll have something to say about him and his tag team partner, but we are here with Sydney Mountain. Of course, she is the triple threat of our Five Town Sound Athletics program. And of course, please continue to follow the Five Town Sound Athletics program, Five Towns _ Sound on Instagram, FTC Women's Soccer on Instagram, also FTC Men's Soccer. Please support the program also on Instagram, and also Sydney Mountain. Make sure you give Sydney a big follow because she is our triple threat. That is Sydney MT. 2115. That is Sydney MT.2115. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. And also, Skulls wants to tell me that I'll be yelling "Go, go, go" as a broadcaster during the soccer game. Well, if it's your game, obviously, would be certainly the hope and goal. And I have a good feeling that that's going to be. I think it's going to be because there's a player that Coach Litwin had that he's going to coach you yet again. Speaking of This Is Your Life, and that is Chelsea Martinez. And I have a feeling Chelsea is going to be right up there with the likes of yourself and Jordan Tobin or Amanda Seltzer, the Kemp sisters, Zoe Kolodny. So, I mean, talk to me about Chelsea Martinez and kind of maybe what you expect going forward with her.
There's I could say so much about Chelsea. Chelsea is honestly like one of my little sisters. She came in, she was kind of timid, and I kind of took her under my wing, showed her like how the program worked, and obviously I couldn't show her how soccer worked because she does that a lot better than me. But
I wasn't going to bring that up.
But I showed her how the school works. Definitely kind of got her to crack open that shell a little bit. Now she's all over the place. I barely see her at school anymore, but I love Chelsea to death. But once again, like I said, she is an amazing soccer player. But as Coach Litwin has definitely told us, she wasn't even scratching the surface of her potential last year. So I'm excited to see what he can bring out of her this next season, because it should be pretty amazing, according to him.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, and I thought it was so interesting to bring up with you also because here's somebody in Coach Litwin that he coaches Chelsea and he coaches her in high school and she has all this success. And now he's going to get a chance to coach her here for a few years at Five Towns. And I almost have to think that relationship is going to spill over to you and everybody else who's coming back here, because you already know off the bat you have a coach coming in who has a relationship with one of the players that you certainly are going to really build upon with this team the next couple of years. I mean, give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, Chelsea has been talking up Coach Litwin since the minute that she found out he was going to be our coach. So, like I said, I love Chelsea to death, so I'll definitely take her word for it. I'm excited to see what Coach Litwin can do and the different kind of relationships that we can build with him, as well as he can build more so with Chelsea and get the full potential out of her, so we can have a program be able to do something like the men's team.
Absolutely. And I think Chelsea, again, only scratching the surface here, and scored 6 goals for us this past season and certainly had some big moments for us already in a short amount of time. And I kind of think that that's only going to build for bigger and better things here when it comes to the rest of the program. And I do have a bunch of comments, so I'm going to have to come back to them. So I would like to do that. Another wrestler here, you're really attracting a lot of the wrestling audience in England, which I have no idea why this was, but maybe they got excited about the fact that you are a soccer player, which is football around the world. And I don't always get a chance to talk about that. And that is Casey Jack Bradley. He says, wrestlers in a soccer interview. How about that? Well, I mean, I might be a wrestling commentator interviewing a soccer star. Yes, that would be an endorsement that I'll take. Skull says she's playing Catch Me If You Can. And also a big shout out to my guest on Sunday, the Big Cheese Logan, who's probably about like 7'3" at this point. I mean, he's really big. I mean, you guys could well, he's not that big, but he's tall. We're actually trying to make him feel good. He's a big cheese, and he's obviously, he got his own T-shirt. He's got his action figure. He's a big deal in the world of professional wrestling, especially in England. But I mean, I want to talk about the Kemp sisters also, because I had the Kemp sisters on I want to say it was during the period where I think you guys were going to play and then you wound up not playing. So this was kind of in the middle of the whole COVID era. And I mean, what did you learn from Nikki and Abby Kemp and everything that they brought to the program? And maybe what do you use with that going forward?
Nikki and Abby are two of the sweetest people that I've ever met, but definitely they've been here longer than I have, so they also understand the importance of adapting to your surroundings just because they are from Arizona. So they are also from very far away. But they definitely helped me be able to adapt to my surroundings and learn how to live away from home, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But because it was definitely very difficult for me at first, just because I am a big like family person and I've never really been this far away for that long of a period of time. So they definitely helped me be able to live away from home, I guess.
Yeah, that's got to be tough, and obviously this is a good transition. We'll come back to some of the soccer team in a few minutes, but you obviously, and I kind of alluded upon it in a joke, but it's actually a big deal in the fact that you're from just outside the Canadian border. You're coming from almost outside the Canadian border, and you're coming just outside of, well, technically just outside of New York City in a way, and Five Towns. And I mean, what drew you to Five Towns, and what was that like? Because you're from one of these little small towns out there, Niagara. I'm actually familiar with the 62 counties. I actually am one of the few people that could probably name all 62 counties in New York. The reason I say that because actually years ago I tried out for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So actually that's kind of one of my claims to fame. That's why I have some fans out there in the world, but. I mean, talk to us though, especially because I have people out there around the world, and really what that transition was like going from upstate to downstate, and just what drew you to Five Towns.
Man, it is a different place down here than up in Buffalo, man. That's all I got to say about that. But
I'm sure, I have no doubt about that. I could see that.
but definitely like what drew me here was I knew I wanted to play basketball still. I knew I wasn't done with it after high school. So I was recruited here through an app called Field Level. So I had a few coaches
Okay.
reach out to me on that. But being able to look at the school through the virtual tour, because the year that I was getting recruited was COVID, so I couldn't come and visit schools.
I
Um,
remember it was virtual. Everything was basically Zoom, and I remember it very well, unfortunately.
Yeah, but definitely what drew me here was the mass communications program because I did know at that point that I wanted to go into sports broadcasting, whether it be the journalism side, the media side, or being an analyst. I didn't really look at the possibility of doing commentary yet, just because had never done it. But at that point, I knew I wanted to go into the sports broadcasting, and having such a small program just because of how like newer it is compared to the other majors here definitely drew me here just because I can get opportunities. Like I could get opportunities last year as a freshman that I would have to wait until junior or senior year if I went to a school like Syracuse, who's known for their broadcasting stuff.
Oh, Bob
So
Costas. I mean, we're talking a who's who of people that came out of Syracuse. I mean, Ian Eagle, and I think Donovan McNabb, when he was playing, even actually went to the communications program. I mean, Syracuse, it speaks for itself. I totally get it. So
yeah,
I
that's honestly what drew me here. So
I could see that. It's funny you say that, and we'll talk about a few other things here in the mass communications program. Because if you think about, obviously, Matt O'Leary was a recent Five Towns graduate. I think he did some stuff here, and obviously he's going on to do some big things. He's a big podcaster. If you've heard of him, he does stuff with the Jets, and he has a massive following out there. And guys like Mike Scudero, who was here a few years before you, and he's kind of somebody that does a number of different things out there with the Yankees, and there's a whole list of people at Five Towns, and even just people like Adam Levine went to Five Towns. And I mean, the Five Towns mass communications program really, I mean, it's funny. When I first got involved in covering Five Towns athletics, I remember speaking with Coach Facina and Matt Gershio, the athletic director. I'm like, yeah, I knew Five Towns College. I didn't realize they played sports. I mean, I knew that they did broadcasting, but I mean, you really are one of the premier places, I would say, definitely in the state in terms of just the overall mass communications program, because there are a lot of NCAA schools, whether they're Division two, three, or even one, Sydney, that don't have what we have here at Five Towns. We've got WFTU radio. We've got YouTube where we stream all these games. We've got live interaction stuff where we can basically learn on the job. And I think really that's kind of the biggest selling point that I think that this program has, is somebody like yourself who's already quick on your feet and is obviously still good on your feet, despite what you may say. I mean, I have to think that you're really in the right place because I would venture to say that in addition to Fordham, Syracuse, Fairfield, and Connecticut, and I mean, a few other places I could think of, this is one of the places that you're going to go. And I think, Sydney, you're going to go and do bigger and better things.
I sure hope so.
I think your coaches will probably certainly be very confident about that. And I mean, speaking of that, I hear from a little birdie and such. You have WFTU radio. You have your own show. And I mean, for those that are listening and watching worldwide here, I mean, who might want to even tune in and such. I mean, talk about what the show unveils and just some other things that has been like in terms of hosting your own show and walk us through that experience, maybe.
So basically, this semester I had to take an intro to radio class where we learn about the surfaces that we use and how to conduct our own radio show. So part of the class, like a technical proficiency kind of thing, is each class has to have their own radio show. So we have to produce it, we have to host it, and sometimes we bring in guests. But so me and my class is actually only 3 people. So it's me, Kyle
Really?
Moffert, and Paul Allen. Both of them are on the men's
Wow.
basketball team.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it made it very easy to decide what we wanted to do as like our show. So we ended up doing a sports talk radio show. We have 3 different segments on the show. So we start with Weddle Unlimited. I don't know if you are familiar with Weddle, but it's kind of like Wordle, except it's with football players. So we
Yep.
do that. And then we have another segment called Build Your Team, where one of us will bring in 2 different players at each starting 5 position for basketball. And we have to blindly pick one based on their stats. And we build our team and like compete against each other to see who built the better team out of the blind comparisons that we have. And then the last segment that we usually do is called Is It a Fact? Each of us bring in hot takes of any sport. We bring in hot takes and we discuss whether or not we think that it's a hot take and we don't think that it's true, or if we think it's a fact. So those are the 3 segments that we do weekly on WFT.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, what is that like in terms of maybe hosting the radio show versus even, let's say, doing color commentary for a game? Because that's a different type of preparation. And I mean, also you're live, right? So I mean, obviously you got to have no nerves, or you got to just go out there and do it. I mean, so what is that preparation like in terms of preparing for your own show and such?
I was definitely more nervous to do the radio show than I was the
Really?
broadcasting, just because, I mean, on the broadcasting side, I've been around the game of basketball since the day I was born. I had 2 older sisters who played. My dad coached them. They're 9 and 8 years older than me, so they were into the game of basketball as much as they could at that age. So I've been around that since the day I was born. I feel as though I have one of the highest basketball IQs that I've ever seen in anybody that I've played with and stuff like that. So I feel as though it was very easy for me to get into the color commentary side of the broadcast. But on the radio side, it was like I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what my 2 co-hosts were going to bring in, because Paul definitely likes basketball a lot more than like NBA basketball than I do, just because I'm more so into the NFL than Paul is. But it's definitely something that has gotten a lot more exciting each and every week that I do it, just because I've gotten more comfortable in the radio station and being around our radio station manager, Rashika Williams. She's definitely made it a very comfortable environment to be in and be able to like settle down and not have any nerves, just because it really doesn't matter what you say as long as you say it with confidence, because some people just aren't going to know what you're talking about in general. So as long as you
Nobody
say
knows what I'm talking about. Don't feel too bad. Don't feel too
So,
bad. I've said
and-
nothing good in 4 years of doing this. So
but like I was saying, as long as you like say things with confidence and like talk about like things that you know, and like you can even say I don't know much about this topic, but I'll put my 2 cents in here and nobody's going to say anything about it. So it's like it's definitely gotten a lot more fun each week that we do it.
that's pretty interesting. And certainly, listen, I mean, if you're confident, it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth. And I have no doubt that you do a great job. And also having somebody like Kyle and Paul who play on the basketball team, I think has also got a bring you closer to them as well, and obviously seeing what they've done also out there as well, just having your own show. And again, I would think that's a pretty unique situation. It's only going to prepare you for the future here. And then speaking of the basketball team, which I'll come back to the women's team, and I'll come around a few different thoughts with that, and we'll come back to the women's soccer team as we are here with the triple threat, Sydney Mountain. I mean, Sydney really does it all. I mean, she plays the game, she scores, she makes big saves. She also does a great job calling these games for our five-town Sound Athletics program. She was also most recently doing color commentary and sideline reporting for the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference men's and women's basketball tournaments. But Damani Merritt, obviously, you're on the call, and you get a chance to call his 1,000th point last weekend. We see him here in the weekend here this past against Villa, and the guys obviously played maybe one of their best games of the season. I think was it Jan Felipe Gelski had said that. I heard a couple of the other guys speak about that, and I was speaking with Damani a little bit off the air because we've had Damani on here, I think, at least 3 or 4 times. He's another guy that has had his own show here at WFTU. And I mean, talk to me about maybe the men's team, but also specifically here, Damani Merritt, who wins HVIAC Player of the Year, scores his 1,000th point, only the second player in school history to do that. And what was that like, maybe being on the call for that?
Oh my God, it was honestly surreal just because Aaron knew that he was working that game and he didn't have a partner that game. So he texted me maybe a week and a half in advance. And he told me that he asked me, do you want to be on the call on Saturday? And I typed in all capital letters, yes, with at least like 5 S's, just because I was so excited to be able to call the game, because me and Damani have definitely gotten a closer relationship these past few years, bonding over basketball, NBA, NFL, and being able to joke around with each other about each other's teams, because he's always talking about how he's a Bills fan just because I'm a Bills fan, but he's not actually a Bills fan. He's a Giants fan. But
I was gonna say, because I've had him on here a few times, and he's even commented in the past, and he actually, I know, was a big Giants fan, because I think we spoke last year about Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, so I knew that actually.
yeah, he just likes to make fun of anytime the Bills do something bad, and then when they do something good, then he's a Bills fan. But it was definitely an amazing moment to be able to be on the call and watch Damani get that 1,000th point, just because as a player, I do know how big of an accomplishment that is. And especially for him doing that in 3 years, it was honestly an amazing experience. And I was so happy that I was there to be able to witness that and be able to call it, because now when he's showing his grandkids his 1,000th point, they're going to hear my voice and Aaron's voice. So
And it's pretty cool because he's, again, really the second person in the school's history to do that in the modern history of the program. Kyrie Sawyer, and somebody that we had on right after he graduated. So it's kind of a really, really cool thing. And obviously for him to do that, also Conference Player of the Year, leads the conference in scoring. And we're really going to miss him in 5 tons. I have to say, I mean, I've just interviewed you, but he's the guy I think at 5 towns that I've had on maybe the most, leave aside Facina. And I kind of feel like he was really an example of somebody I would hope that all the players aspire to be, in terms of just his enthusiasm, how he was very professional on the court, off the court. I mean, I really think we're going to miss him here. I mean, Kyrie Sawyer was one thing, but I don't think Kyrie, with all due respect, has the personality that Damani does. Damani is a little bit more of a larger than life. Him and Sebastian Montenegro, maybe I'd say those are the two in terms of just their, larger than life personalities. And talk about how much I think we're going to really miss Damani here at 5 towns.
man, Damani's a personality around here. Like, you can't go anywhere without somebody mentioning Damani's name, just because of maybe something he did the night before, or talking about him at the basketball game, or saying, "Oh, hey, I have class with Damani," and it's like it's definitely gonna be different around here without Damani, just because of how his personality is. He's a very outgoing person. He likes to talk to all kinds of people. He likes to be inclusive, and we're definitely going to miss him around here, and me especially, just because of how close that I have gotten to Damani. I'm definitely going to miss him.
Yeah, I could definitely see how you guys, in terms of just your personalities, in terms of just easygoing, very enthusiastic, energetic. And I do have a comment from somebody that used to coach here, and she was one of my favorites. That was Christy Herring here, of the former volleyball coach. Yeah, anything you want to say to Coach now that Coach is tuned in? We definitely miss Coach here at 5 towns.
I was just about to say, miss you, coach. Wish you were here so we could do some more spring volleyball practices.
Yeah, she was one of our favorites here on definitely in the program, and I felt like I had her on, and then it was like right afterwards, it was like she left. It was almost like certainly those are different things here. But Casey Jack Bradley has a good comment. Being confident to speak in front of people is challenging, especially if there are millions of people or a live crowd. It can be scary, even for wrestlers when we do promos. But I'm sure there's a trick to calm yourself down and just go out there and perform. And Coach says she misses you too. You know what? I'll come back to Casey, but you have a funny Coach story that you might want to share that we could hear on Sportswire, as long as it's a good story. Anything? Any memorable moments with Coach?
With oh my goodness, I mean, honestly, with Coach Herring, I mean, I came into the gym during the spring, and she was having like her spring volleyball practices and stuff like that, and she knew that I played in high school, and I told her that I missed it a little bit, so she told me to get on the court. So I and then she was just fixing everything that I was doing, even though I wasn't even on her team. And I miss being able to put up the nets and be able to hit the volleyball around a little bit, just because that was something that I did in high school to relieve a little bit of stress, just because I didn't have as much pressure on me as I did for my basketball team, just because of how successful we were on the basketball court. But I definitely miss being able to just like fool around and just play volleyball a little bit, you know?
Absolutely, and boy, what sport don't you play? Now, I know you play basketball. I know you play soccer. I know you love football, and we know you love volleyball. I mean, listen, we're starting up lacrosse. I know here coming up. Do you want to try lacrosse next? I mean, is there a sport at Five Towns that maybe we're working on that you want to play? I mean, because you could probably play them all, I'm sure.
Lacrosse is one thing that I never got into. It's not very popular up around Western New York, so I definitely did not get into that one as much. Never played in my life, so I probably won't be doing that. Probably taking the spring off. Two sports for me right now is enough.
Are you gonna miss it though? I mean, because obviously you just called these games. You were on the. I know we had some injuries though, but you're on the soccer field. You're on the basketball court. I mean, are you gonna miss, let's say, these next several months without maybe the possibility of playing an organized sport? I know we're still obviously recovering from the injury and such, but I mean, are you gonna miss the fact that you can't watch any action at the very least this spring coming?
I mean, yeah, that's always the downside of having an off season, you know. But and also with the injury as well, just because it is the second time that I've majorly injured my left knee, so I do have experience sitting on the sideline or not watching anything at all already, just because of the injury from last year, being out for 5 months. But going into this next off season, I mean, I'm gonna have to focus more so on myself, just my physical well being. So it's definitely going to be hard to not be able to see any of my teammates playing or anything, but it's something that has to happen, just because I need to get my knee physically better in order for me to be able to play on the soccer field or the basketball court. And if other people want to see me play, I have to be able to get myself right in order to be able to play myself.
I know Coach had spoke about that with us a couple of weeks ago, and obviously we have you here. And before we transition, I mean, how are you doing? How are you feeling with the knee and such?
I did get MRIs done on it, so I don't have any major tearing, but I do have a major bone bruise in there, and the cartilage in my knee is wearing away. So he did talk about the possibility of surgery, just to get everything connected to so it doesn't slide out again, just because it is the second time it's dislocated majorly, and I did have a brace on it the second time, so I can't really trust braces right now. So he suggested surgery. So when I go home for spring break, I'll probably go and talk to a surgeon back at home, and whether or not he says yes or no, I'll do it at the beginning of the summer. So it'll be a 3 to 6 month healing process, they said. So I will definitely forfeit a summer to be able to come back here and at least be on the sidelines.
3 to 6 months. I mean, we'd probably be ready for the basketball season. Soccer could be a tough call there, and coach wants to say that you were a rock star on the sideline with the biggest support of her teammates, even not being on the volleyball team. She brought such spirit. That's a great point by coach, and I want to talk to you about that, which will kind of tie into some of the other programs. And obviously, we know that you've done some work with the basketball teams and the radio show, but I mean, in Five Towns, I do feel like that the other sports teams do support each other, and I think that's why we have such a special environment here at Five Towns, especially as to why we're adding cross country, we're adding lacrosse, and how important do you think that was for you and maybe even some of your other teammates to kind of support each other on different teams that maybe even you're not a part of?
I mean, I'm definitely a big supporter of athletes supporting athletes because we all know how much work each of us put in every day just to be able to produce what we can on the court or on the field. So I'm one who likes to support, but also just being a sports fan in general. I love to be at sporting events. So, I mean, being able to watch a game and being able to support people that I do talk to on a regular daily basis to see their progression as the season goes. It's something that is kind of rewarding to see like your friends succeed in other aspects of their game that you don't get to see often just because it is like they work on it behind closed doors. So, but I'm also one to bring a lot of school spirit. I don't know what it is, but I like hyping other people up. I like hyping up the school. So it's honestly just a win-win for me at this point.
Well, Five Towns is a place that I could certainly see why you'd want to have that school spirit because almost all of the athletes here at Five Towns, they're all genuinely good people. I mean, listen, I shouldn't even say this, but I'll say it anyway because I get in trouble with a lot of things. But, I've had on a lot of different people here in my career, and there's some people, you know what? I wouldn't want to really root for them. But at Five Towns, I could honestly say, even if they're not the most, how can I say, talkative players, they're still wonderful human beings. I mean, even a Maria Medina, we've had Maria on here in the past, just such a nice girl. I know we're going to miss her, obviously, here at the
Mhm.
program. She's an example of that. We think about Amanda Seltz, who's going to no longer be with us. I mean, just a whole list of people here. And Skulls wants to say that he's sending you prayers, and he also says being on the sidelines sucks because Skulls is actually also out from injury. He's also an injured wrestler, so he's dealing with that. So when you spoke about some of these like possible injuries and almost all the wrestlers on Sportswire we've had on here because of the nature of that type of work is they all have surgeries and they all have lots of surgeries. So let's hope you don't have to go into that rage here. But we are on Sportswire Radio. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you like what you hear from Sportswire Radio, you can give us a like and follow on Facebook at Sportswire Radio. YouTube, subscribe to our page at Sportswire Radio. And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. And also, you can follow us on Instagram at the Sports Report 2021. Also, I am on Twitter at Thomas Bryce 2017. And please continue to support the Five Towns Sound athletics program. 11 hearts beating as one. Five Towns College. Sound on, sound on. Five Towns _ sound, FTC women's soccer, FTC women's basketball, FTC men's soccer, also Sydney Mount 2115. Make sure you follow her on Instagram because she is somebody that is one day whenever she decides to retire from playing, she will gladly take this mic here and probably do a hell of a lot more job than yours truly. But we're very honored to maybe around another 25 or 30 more minutes with Sydney. She knows she's a very, very busy person right now. Sydney, I did want to ask you about the championship that you did win here at Five Towns, which was last year, which we covered quite a bit, and that was winning the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Championship. And the way you guys won that was kind of a thrilling game. I remember watching the game like it was yesterday, and right around this time we were talking about, well, what seed you guys are going to be in, the USCA, and all that kind of fun stuff. But what was that like here actually winning the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Championship last year with the women's basketball team?
It was a surreal moment just because it was my first year here. I was a freshman on the team, being the only freshman on the team, being able to play not play a whole season, but being around these girls for the whole season. It was honestly just surreal to be able to see the progress that we made from day one and to winning the HBIAC. But it definitely takes experience, and it definitely takes hard work, which I know both all of our girls have. But I will say it's not the first league championship or conference championship that I've won.
I
So
heard you say it on the telecast. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Have we won? I think five. I think four plus one and five times. I know I caught you say that at the end of the last game there. No, so talk about that.
yeah, so in high school, I was playing for the Cardinal O'Hara women's basketball team, um, arguably known as the powerhouse of Western New York. It produces so many Division I women's basketball players. I'm so lucky that I was able to play with and against multiple of them, and to see their success now in the Division I programs is surreal. To even say, "Hey, I played with her or I played against her." But yeah, being able to be there all 4 years, because right now I think tomorrow they go for their 10th straight league championship. So I was a part of 5, 6, 7, and 8. They won last year. My younger sister was on the team last year. She actually transferred to the public school near our house now, so she only has a 5-minute drive to school, whereas I had a 30 minutes drive to school. But um, yeah, so being able to win 5, 6, 7, 8 there, and then being able to win the first one here, I definitely felt as though the one here felt a little bit more special to me, just because it was the first one, and I got to be able to be a part of that first one.
What was that experience like being a part of the USCA and the Nationals? I know we speak with the players that were on the men's soccer teams, but having you on here and kind of just curious about that experience from your lenses in terms of maybe going to the Nationals and the memory of that.
I mean, the USCA, it's just like any other division. I mean, granted, we don't have the title of NCAA, but every team in the USA works just as hard as an NCAA program, and it's great to be able to have like a division for ourselves for the smaller schools in the country. So I've enjoyed playing in the USCAA, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go from here.
Absolutely, no question about that. I know obviously things ended not the way we would have hoped. Obviously, you on the court and even off the court with the team and such, and I would expect that next season things will go a little bit differently in terms of you'll be back regardless of the surgery and some other players. And is that something that maybe the players that were on the team that before the decision was announced with the women's basketball team that it would maybe be something that would motivate you guys that you will be back in terms of just what you kind of saw this season versus last season? I mean, give me your thoughts on that.
It definitely sucked having our season end the way it did, just because it kind of took us and like hit us in the back of the head, because it was on an unexpected night. We were playing a conference game against Berkeley. We had people who were having outstanding nights that usually don't score as much, myself included. Don't want to put that out there. But it definitely sucks being able to have the kind of night that I was having and have it all just kind of tumble apart just because of one injury. And then, of course, Maria's concussion. But it definitely is boosting us into next season, because we saw our competition this past weekend, and we felt as though that we could compete with these teams. Maybe we might not have won, but we felt as though that we could compete. Having only 5 people, it's very hard to complete a game, a 40-minute long game, and it's definitely hard to do that with 5 people. But we felt as though that we could compete with the other teams in the conference. So it definitely sucks, but we're definitely using that as motivation for next year.
Absolutely, I have no doubt that we will. And I actually watched the game. I think it was 2 years ago. It was York and John Jay, and York finished. They started the game, I think, with 7 players, and because of foul outs, which I was very bizarre, they actually wound up. It went from 5 players to 4 players, and in overtime, 3 players. They were up by like 20 plus points, and all of a sudden, because their players started fouling out, John Jay wins the game. So it actually, to your point about 5 players, you have to have more than 5 players because there are things that do happen out there. So that's an excellent point. And Casey Jack Bradley also wants to say hard work pays off. Keep going and win as much gold as you can when you heal. He gives a big wink with that. We certainly appreciate that. We know that you are going to do that. I wanted to talk about a player that I know you're very close with on the soccer team, and I see her sometimes a lot on these different streams for the basketball games. That is Zoe Coloni. I know you and Zoe are obviously very close. I know we spoke about Jordan and the relationship there in Chelsea, but you got to talk about Zoe Coloni for us. Obviously, you play with her on the soccer team, and she's always there at the basketball game. So talk to me about Zoe Coloni and what she's like as a teammate.
And once again, I could say so much about Zoe. Zoe is literally my best friend. She was one of the first people that I met here on the team. She's very welcoming. She's amazing. I love her. She's another one that is literally like my sister now. Just this time it's an older sister because she is a year older than me. But I love Zoe, and I definitely love to be able to play on the field with her just because it's a sport where she knows a lot more than I do because she did play soccer growing up. And it's great to be able to see her succeed. Like she had a goal this year against FIT, even though she has spent most of her time on the defensive end for us like last year and that. But it's so amazing to be able to see people that you are very close with succeed in the sports that they are. So which is why you see her at the basketball games, just because like I said, me and her have a very close bond. So she wants to be able to see me succeed as well as me seeing her succeed. Just because I'm on the field with her doesn't mean that she can't come and support when, she's not on the court. But me and her definitely have one of the strongest bonds on the team. And honestly, I think at this school.
It's funny you said that, and in a way, kind of transitioning back to the soccer team and certainly a few other things before we close out. But I think a player like her, I know we spoke a little bit about with her with Coach Litwin. That's going to be a player I think that's going to be really important to this team, and just in terms of her experience, her leadership. And do you think that somebody like a Zoe Coloni is probably going to be more important to this team's success, maybe in terms of what her statistics will be, just because of kind of her leadership and sort of maybe just what she brings in terms of as an overall teammate?
Oh, definitely. Zoe is definitely a leader that knows how to talk to everybody the way that everybody likes to be talked to. Because there's some people that you can get to them by like screaming and yelling, but there's also people who can't do that. But once again, Zoe doesn't do that. She talks to everybody the way that they know like they can take information. And she's definitely a great leader on the soccer field because she does take her experience and she does help people like me and the other people who don't have as much experience as her. And like I said, it's just amazing to be able to watch her do what she knows how to do. And I'm excited to see her step up into that leadership role even more because she was a leader this past year, being one of our captains this past year. So I'm definitely excited to see what the soccer team has in store for her next year.
Absolutely, no question about it. I know we're going to miss Amanda Seltzer quite a bit as well. She was one of our other captains. And what did you learn from her?
She told me to leave everything out there. She was definitely one because she was on the sideline a lot this past season because of injury. So she also knows what I was kind of going through. So she was definitely helping me go through that the past year during my freshman year. So, but she's let me know, leave everything out there. That you've got nothing left to lose. Play every game like it's your last.
Hey, that's it. Listen, I mean, you got to live every day like it's your last, and just enjoy it all in. And certainly, you never know what can happen. But I have a feeling we're going to have many more moments. And I have to ask you about our athletic director here, Matt Gershio. Obviously, Matt was a huge part of things this past weekend. And I was even seeing Matt was he like, I think, cleaning the basketball court at one point? He was kind of either taking his hand or taking his shoe on something. He literally does everything for this program. I've even heard he'll help out and give water to the soccer players. And he's just always available, and he's obviously been one of our biggest champions here on Sportswire over the past 4 years. And I had to ask you before we move on here about Matt Gershio, our athletic director, and what he has meant to you.
Yeah, Matt does everything that he can. He takes a lot of pride in the field and the court and in his office and stuff like that. So you will see him do the little things that maybe haven't been done by maintenance. But he takes a lot of pride in his working space, and he does everything that he can for each and every one of our student athletes, just because he knows as student athletes we have possibly different needs than a regular student does, just because of the different schedules that we have. And he's always willing to cooperate with us and sit there and maybe listen to us if we had a bad day. But once again, Matt is amazing at what he does. So I'm very grateful to have him.
He's absolutely one of the reasons why this program has grown leaps and bounds over the past few years. You think about it, Sydney, before you came here, and I got in touch with Matt Gershio because we have a mutual contact in the former athletic director, John Matejko, who was a legendary basketball coach here on Long Island. And at that time, I think we really just had men's soccer. I think Coach Herring had sort of just maybe gotten up the volleyball team, and we kind of had a sort of a basketball team because Kyrie Sawyer had played that 1 year here before COVID. So if you really think about it, we really didn't have much. And you think about it now, what we have here at Five Towns, where we have the soccer teams, we have the basketball teams, we have the cross country coming in, the lacrosse coming. That's all really because of his leadership, also Dr. Cohn, and that's what really we need, people like that. And that's why we're very, very lucky when Five Towns is doing all these things and we get a chance to cover it because of the people like Matt Gershio. And before I ask you a few other thoughts in closing here, I had to ask you again about Aaron McLaughlin because I was watching, and the reason I wanted to bring him up again is because I found you and him so professional on this telecast. And obviously, I know he does work with the Long Island Ducks, and he's a guy just in terms of his transitions, just in terms of how he talks, and, very, very ahead of his time in terms of his age and what he does out here. And on these telecasts, I mean, what have you learned from an Aaron McLaughlin? Maybe you might actually take with you in terms of whether you do this next season or even when you go back to playing.
Oh man, I love calling the games with Aaron just because once again he's a big sports person. He loves the game of basketball, so he does know what he's talking about when he is on the broadcast with me. And it's great to be able to have somebody like that just because you can bounce off of each other or you can bring references in from different sports. Like I know one time we were on the call and we were talking about Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs at one point.
Well, you're a big Bills fan. I knew that was coming.
Yeah, definitely. I can't go one day without talking about the Bills, so I had to bring it up. But once again, love being on the call with Aaron. He's very quick on his feet. He knows what to do if something goes wrong. He's always talking back to our control room to get some graphics up for me to talk about. Oh my God, he's honestly one of the best that I've.
No. Listen, this guy. Let me tell you something, and I'm not just saying it because I don't throw nice words easily. I'm a guy. I'm a straight shooter. I've been doing this a long time. I've had on a lot of people. I've had on New York State senators. I've had on professional wrestling champions. I've had baseball Hall of Famers. You name them, right? But Aaron is a real pro. Aaron's a guy that he's going to definitely broadcast somewhere, whether it's going to be at a higher college level, whether it's somewhere like the Long Island Ducks. And I think that you're a part of that because I think what you're doing, I would hope that we get to hear you on more games in the future at Five Towns. So I know that you're going to be back out there, but I hope, personally, my question to you is I hope we'll still get you out there calling games next season.
Definitely just because of the possibility of the surgery, I do have the possibility of taking a year off of sports to get my body at its full potential so I can come back for my senior year because next year is my junior year. So I do still have that time to recover. I'm definitely thinking about doing more of the broadcast next year and maybe even possibly keeping the radio show next year. So there's a lot of opportunities for me here, like I said earlier in the interview, but everything happens for a reason, I believe. So I think having the injury that I have definitely is helping me more so towards my career aspect, whereas, basketball and soccer end after a few years.
Listen, I mean, realistically, and I say this very, very respectfully, I mean, the reality of it is that your career is only going to take you through college. And I am actually friends with somebody that was a college basketball player who was known on our Friday night shows called the Brute Force Brad Weiss, and he had played at St. Joseph's, Long Island, and he's in their top all-time list in rebounds and block shots, and he's transitioned into now doing this. And on top of that, he's actually further solidified himself as a coach. So you do have those opportunities. Listen, you could even take the brute force Brad Weiss's chair because, listen, all he does is complain about the Knicks and he complains about the Jets. And we get somebody else here from up the state that might give us a little bit more of a different insight. So, I mean, listen, the Brute Force, maybe his time is coming up, and we'll take you. You're a triple threat because the Brute Force really isn't a triple threat. So maybe we'll use you to replace him. I'm only kidding. We love the Brute Force, and obviously, anytime the floor would be open with you Friday nights. But I realize you're a very, very busy person. You've got a lot on your plate because you do your own stuff. And also, Coach Vicina says Bradley Weiss, wow, because Coach Vicina knows the Brute Force very well. Because Coach Vicina, now I don't know if you know this or not here, Sydney, apparently is a legendary softball player. And the Brute Force Brad Weiss, for a little bit of a time, was actually trying to maybe take a stab at being a softball player. He had a team called the Long Island Brew Crew. Basically, players you probably would have heard of. A bunch of college baseball players, college basketball players who decide, you know what? They had got a couple pounds in them. They got the beer guts now. And now they want to go out and try the softball world. And didn't really work out too much for them, but Coach Vicina, apparently, he's gone out there and won multiple championships, traveled all over the place, and the Brute Force couldn't hang with them. The Brute Force was almost like in White Man Can't Jump, Woody Harrelson's character. That was the Brute Force when it came to the softball field. I am going to get lynched for this, so let's move away for this, because the best thing you can do is say no comment on that, but the best thing we can do is give a big shout-out to Coach Vicina. But I did want to ask you, before we move on to a few more thoughts on Five Towns here, I mean, are you optimistic the Bills can maybe get to an AFC championship game or a Super Bowl here coming up in 23? Because I feel like this team has been knocking on the door now for a few years, and whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Mother Nature or some unfortunate things off the field, this team that has had so much success, unfortunately, just can't get through the door.
Man, if you start talking about the Bills, I could talk about it all day, but I'll keep my off-season spiel a little shorter.
Well, you're welcome anytime Friday nights. If you want to talk about the Bills, I will give you that floor.
I definitely believe that it's definitely in the future, just because, like you said, they have been knocking on the door, but there's just bits and pieces that are missing. I believe that they need to start focusing more on the offensive side of the ball, just because ever since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane got here, they have been drafting defensive players in the first few rounds. And one of the stats that I like to bring up is Josh Allen has never played with a first round wide receiver or anybody on the offense, just because of how we like to focus on the defensive side. So I believe if they focus more so on the offensive side, because if you look at the playoff teams from this past year who ended up making it in, they were offensive powerhouses. Like Kansas City didn't have that great of a defense.
City. San Francisco, second half of the season. Philadelphia, sure. Minnesota, even. Yeah,
they were offensive powerhouses. So I feel as though in this league right now, you have to get by with offensive powerhouses, because yeah, your defense can only stop so many, but if your offense doesn't put up points, it's just pointless at this point.
Also, I feel like the Bills could use a little bit more of a better attack on the rushing end of it. I think Josh Allen, there was something off with him the second half of the season. I know there was some talk about the injury and such. I don't know how much that limited him. And I did feel like there was something off with Josh. And this was not the Josh Allen we saw of the past few years. Am I missing something here on that?
You know, I definitely think that the UCL sprain definitely did something to him, just because the second half of the season was a much different person than the first half of the season. I really wish we could have gotten back to that first 2 weeks offense from the Bills, beating the Rams and the Titans. But I mean, I don't want to like lash him or anything, but Ken Dorsey didn't really get that creative. Ken Dorsey's our offensive coordinator, for anybody that doesn't know. But
yep, sure.
He didn't really get that creative at the end of the season, and people figured out his system, and they would double team Stephon Diggs, which is why he was getting frustrated at the end of the season, because he wasn't getting the targets that he definitely should have. There were many times when Josh had to force balls into spots that he couldn't get them in, but at that point, it's the only thing open, and that's where most of his interceptions came from, or from drop passes from his receivers. And it was definitely hard to watch the offense the second half of the season, just because defenses did start ending up figuring out the system that they were using, and there was no creativity in it or anything to get anybody open.
Yeah, I just felt for whatever reason that the last 6 or 7 games of the season, there was something off with the Bills team. Leave aside what happened in Cincinnati, but even the Patriots game, last game of the regular season, the Miami game at home and in the opening rounds of the playoffs, they weren't impressive. And there's just something was just off with this team a little bit. Even the Miami game, that was the Saturday night game, and I mean they won their games, no question. They win 13 games, and obviously this is one of the better regular seasons the franchise has had. But I kind of feel like since that Vikings game where they wound up losing in overtime, that was where the Bills season in a way kind of went not south, but it definitely was different. And I think his stats, Josh Allen, would certainly explain that. So, I mean, obviously we'll see what happens. Obviously, listen, sooner rather than later, the NFL season will start. I know it just ended, but it'll start. Listen, quicker than a New York minute, and who knows? Listen, Friday nights we pick our games, and apparently the Brute Force Budweiser. I guess somebody must have tipped him off because he actually just messaged. I guess he must have heard from a birdie. He says here, great analysis here, Jason Facina. She can have my job. So if you want his spot Friday nights 9:30 p.m. we are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and a lot of other places. So if you did want the Brute Force's spot, he's going to basically defer it to you because you seem like you have a little bit more of a more in-depth knowledge, especially when it comes to the NFL. Because the Brute Force, we did NFL picks this year, and his picks weren't so good this year. He touted himself as this brute guy who knows everything. His fantasy league, he was the champion, his picks, and he was kind of in the middle of the pack, actually. So the Brute Force, when it comes to his NFL knowledge, probably isn't as superior as your knowledge. So who knows? Maybe it's a passing of the torch. But I think you could take my mic rather than the Brute Force's spot because I think at this point people are getting sick of me on Sportswire. They want to see me out. They want me to get the hook. I mean, listen, they want to see me removed. So maybe you could certainly do a better job than me. And of course, big shout out as always to Coach Bradley Weiss, who by the way is coaching here on Long Island also for our Plainview JFA Hawks boys JV team. He's also an assistant on the varsity team, and he's also involved with the Long Island Nets. So the Brute Force is certainly on his way, and he's a big guy, by the way. Damani could have used him this past season at 5 Towns. If he had a couple years eligibility left, he could have definitely used him because the team was lacking a little bit on certain things. But could you have imagined the Brute Force and Jan Philippe Yagelski out there? Could have been the Twin Towers almost out there. Could have been,
goodness.
listen, almost they would have, listen, Julius Randle would have had nothing on those guys. Listen, they would have Julius Randle couldn't even guard them. Listen, the Brute Force is a big Julius Randle fan, despite what he may say. Well, actually, I'm waiting. Yeah, well, I'm waiting Friday for the Brute Force to say New York stand up because the Brute Force has been down on the Knicks all season. He's been saying, for this team, I can't get excited about him. And only he would say, which we love the WNBA, by the way, because we've gone to some WNBA games, but he'd say New York, the Liberty are the number one team. But now, with the Knicks on this amazing winning streak and beating the Celtics the way they did on Monday, I cannot wait to hear what the Brute Force has to say Friday night. Maybe we'll get a New York stand up once again from the Brute Force. But enough about that. I want to move on here quickly before we get to closing thoughts. And I wanted to ask you, and I know it's hard because you have this injury coming up here that you're going to have to deal with, but what are your goals here in terms of, let's say, for the women's soccer and the women's basketball teams later this year when they return to action?
Obviously as a team, we have the goal of winning HVIAC and making it to nationals. That's everybody's goal, but being able to get into the gym or get onto the field and get 1% better every day is honestly just a major goal. But individually wise, I mean, for 2023, definitely being able to physically get myself better and be able to get back onto the field, into the court to support my teammates and as well as the other teams, and being able to get out there and produce and have a body on the field, because as many people know, our women's soccer team doesn't have many numbers, but we're definitely growing as a program and we're getting more numbers. So team wise, obviously just getting better every single day, but individually wise, just being able to get myself physically better and being able to get back onto the field and the court.
I have a feeling we're going to do that here because I think obviously Coach Litwin just signed Anna Hauser. That's his first official recruit here. I think that's going to be a big one here for us. I also think Jason Facina, our coach here for these few years, deserves also a lot of credit because he at least gave the tools. He was basically the guy that laid the foundations here. And with Coach Litwin, his success, his decorated run at Roosevelt, he's going to be able, I think, to do what Coach Vicina had started to do here. And I think with you and Zoe and obviously people like Chelsea Martinez and Anna and everybody else that's going to come back that was on the team last year, Jordan Tobin as well. I mean, I think we're going in the right direction. I think having Chelsea and Jordan for another year together, I think Anna Hauser, I mean, certainly Zoe Colodny, her leadership. So I think that there's certain things in place that we're going to build to us. And I think with the basketball court, I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to learn from what happened with some of the different things, and we're going to build off that. And I think also credit to all the different people that have been there that are not going to be with us, whether it was a Maria Medina or the Kemp. So I think there's a lot still that we can be proud of, and you have been a huge part of it. So I want to ask you this last question before I get to closing thoughts here. I know you've had several moments. You've called games. You have your own radio show. You've won a Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference championship. You've scored goals. You've made big saves. I get all that. But if you had one or two moments at Five Towns so far that stand out, what would they be?
I mean, number one, obviously being winning the championship last year. Like I said, it was just a surreal moment to be able to do that in my freshman year and be able to help produce that championship caliber here at Five Towns. But the second one would have to be this past season. Coach Vicina would sat us down with Matt Gercio and told us what happened with the coin flip to see who got into the conference championship, and be able to sit there and listen to Matt tell us that we're going to conference championship was honestly even more surreal, just because if you would have told us like a year before that, because Matt did tell us that. He said, next year we're coming to Word of Life with both teams on this bus competing. We all looked at him like, Matt, really? Are you serious? But fast forwarding to a year later, listening to him say, we're going to conference championships was honestly just a surreal moment as well.
You know, it's funny you said that, because I actually do think I remember Matt telling me on the phone something similar to that. And I remember last year when Matt had actually called me on his way to Virginia. And then obviously Facina going down there these past 2 years, we've heard quite a bit about it because we had Coach on after both seasons when the team went down there and had the runs that they had. So I kind of think that we're going to get there. Something tells me here that I think we are going to get both teams down there to Virginia, because I think that there's a program, there's a foundation in place, and sometimes you need the ingredients to cook the meal. And I think what Coach Vicina has done, and I think it's so important to give him a lot of credit. And I'm not just saying this because he's a friend or he's somebody that I've got a chance to know here in almost 4 years. It's really because the fruits bear that labor, that success. You being here, and Chelsea Martinez, Anna Hauser coming in here now, and Jordan Tobin's a bid. That was Coach Vicina. Jordan Tobin was all Coach Vicina. I mean, Jordan Tobin is somebody that could play Division II, Division I even. I mean, so we have athletes here that I think that are going to help. And I think also even the men's team, the success, it motivates you and everybody else because you see them have that success. And that's why I asked that earlier in the interview, because I think that it's going to motivate us. I think it's going to put us to where we need to be. And I think you got to get there. Listen, Rome wasn't built in a day. And there's always an old expression I say. It was famous by John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I have no doubt that a rising tide is going to lift our boats here. And I think Jeff Litwin's the man for the job. I think Jason Facina is still going to be around. And I think the basketball teams were going right there. So I think that we are very, very excited about the future of Five Towns. It is going to be sound on here throughout. And Sydney Mountain's always going to have sound on because she's doing a phenomenal job broadcasting, doing color commentating, hosting her own radio show, her knowledge of the Buffalo Bills, her knowledge of almost everything out, but most importantly, what she does on the field and on the court for our Five Town Sound Athletics program. And that is why we were honored to have her here tonight with us. And we certainly hope that we'll hear from her many, many more times. And you're also welcome to join us on next season. We have a NFL Sportswire NFL picks, and I've actually said whoever wins gets a championship belt. And one of your teammates is actually tuned in here, and she says, "Let's go, Sydney!" Here. That is Zoe Colon. You had a lot of fans tonight. Listen, I don't know what you were expecting. I don't know what the listenership is like at WFTU, but on Sportswire, we have a lot of fans out there. So you definitely had people tune in. Anything else you want to say to Zoe before I get to closing thoughts from you now that she's here live and in person?
I love you, Zoe. That's all I got to say. That's it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm sure you guys will be going to Mets games soon, as obviously the Mets season is getting ready to kick off. But I am sure that this won't be the last of you, and certainly the last of everyone else at our Five Town Sound athletics program. They're one of the premier athletics programs around. And Sydney, I want to give you the floor now. I want to give you some closing thoughts. And anything else you want to plug, promote, share, say. And it has been absolutely a tremendous honor to have had you on here and to hear your story and hear some of the things that has made you the person that you are today. And I turn it over to you. Anything else you want to promote? If you want to promote WFTU where we can listen to you, that as well would be good. And anything else on your mind, I can't thank you enough, and the floor is yours.
Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me and letting me be able to tell like my background and my story and how I got to Five Towns. But I mean, plugging in on WFTU Radio at 3 o'clock on Thursdays, you can listen to my radio show called Three is Company with me, Kyle, and Paul. So you can listen to that. And then the only other thing that I have to add is that I'm going to teach you how to say goodbye in Buffalo because nobody here knows how to do that. You say
I'm from
hello and
Brooklyn. I'm
goodbye.
not going to know that. Yeah. How
You
do I
say
do it?
hello and goodbye in the same way, and it's just two simple words. Go Bills.
Go Bills. Okay, all right. You know what? I will certainly make sure to note that. Listen, on a bonus, the Sabres are actually playing pretty well too. So in Buffalo, things are
Uh,
certainly looking up here. I'm an Islanders fan, so it looks like the Bills, because of the games in hand here, the Sabres are going to wind up probably surpassing the Islanders. So Buffalo, it's been a tough run for sports, but it looks like things might be picking up here. And Sydney Mountain, no doubt about it, is going to be at the top of the mountain when it comes to all that, especially for our Sabres, our Bills, but most importantly, our Five Town Sound Athletics program. Thursdays, 3 p.m. Tomorrow, you can catch her on WFTUradio.com, I believe it is. And you can also follow her on Instagram at Sydney Mount, that is .2115. FTC Women's Soccer on Instagram, FTC Women's Basketball on Instagram, Five Towns _sound as well. And we look forward to the future. And Sydney, I can't thank you enough. And we definitely look forward to speaking with you soon. And for you, I'll say go Bills because it's hello and goodbye. Because I wouldn't be good at saying hello and goodbye anyway. Because like I said, the running joke is I'm from Brooklyn, so I really don't have much of speaking skills to begin with. But that's why you're going to be the big radio star, and I'm going to be little old me. But thank you for our time, Sydney, and get well, and we'll definitely hear from you soon.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we were here on Sportswire Radio tonight with Sydney Mountain. She is the triple threat, as some would say, because she does a phenomenal job on the field, on the court for our women's soccer and women's basketball teams. She also does a phenomenal job, as you heard her, on the color commentary alongside Aaron McLaughlin for our Five Town Sound basketball teams, also for the Hudson Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Tournament. She also hosts her own shows Thursdays at 3 p.m. on WFTU Radio. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. I am the host of the Sports Report, the owner of Sportswire Radio. I am the jack of all trades and the master of all of them. And we will be back here Friday night, 8 p.m. British Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time with pro wrestling star Slugger Hampton, the one-man militia. So we'll certainly hear a lot from what Slugger has to say and more. But if you are on sportnarium.com/player, you'll go back to your regularly scheduled programming. It's whatever music I have put in the system. And if you're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, goodbye for now. We will be back Friday afternoon, New York time. Thank you again to Sydney Mountain, and also thank you to the Five Town Sound Athletics program, specifically coaches Jason Facina, Jeff Litwin, and also Matt Gershio, our athletic director, for granting us this opportunity. Thank you, everybody here, for tuning in on the number one global radio station that is Sports Wire Radio.